Are the Eagles now legitimate contenders in the NFC? I break down their schedule and make predictions. Also, the Phillies offense does a 180 from their West Coast road trip. What do they need to do to turn it around? Next, I asked you guys for some Philly sports hot takes yesterday on my Instagram, and boy did you guys deliver. And finally, this week's trivia question with giveaway details. Be sure to stick around for all that and more. The first episode of the Philly Sports Spot podcast and YouTube channel starts right now. What's going on, everybody, and welcome into the inaugural edition of the Philly Sports Spot podcast and YouTube channel. I am your host, Jordan Hirsch. And now, guys, before we get into this episode, if you're here from the YouTube side, please like this video and subscribe to my channel with notifications turned on. And if you're here from the podcast side, please share this podcast with anybody and everybody that you feel would want to listen. Now, guys, we have got a lot to get to this week, beginning with the Birds. Yes, the Eagles go out and sign their CB2 for 2022. Howie Roseman signs James Bradberry to a one-year, $7.25 million deal that could go up to $10 million with incentives. Now, this is just a fantastic signing by Howie Roseman as he continues his red-hot offseason for the Eagles. James Bradberry is going to be a fantastic duo along with Darius Slay over at the other cornerback position. Now, I'd seen actually a tweet earlier this week by Dave Zangaro over from NBC Sports Philadelphia that stated that there are only two players in the entire NFL since 2016 that have had 15 or more interceptions and 80 or more pass breakups, and now they're on either side of each other in the Eagles secondary. Man, this Eagles defense is looking really scary. Obviously, they add Nakobe Dean, Jordan Davis to their linebacker position and defensive line spot. I mean, they have no holes right now. They have no holes. You're going to have Avonte Maddox and Anthony Harris at safeties. That's not obviously the best duo in the league, but you know what? With the way the rest of the Eagles defense is stacked up, it's going to do. It's going to do. This Eagles defense is going to be really good this year as long as they can stay healthy. It's going to be something that other quarterbacks are really going to have to watch out for because now, I mean, the Eagles linebackers last year, obviously, were not the best in coverage. I mean, Alex Singleton is just a liability, really. And now they've got Nakobe Dean to kind of aid with that. Nakobe Dean was a fantastic coverage linebacker in college at the University of Georgia last season. Alex Singleton's still going to be there. We got Jannard Avery. He was really good. TJ Edwards, obviously, was a breakout. He was really a breakout star last year in some respects for the Eagles. I mean, this Eagles defense is really going to be fun to watch this season. And they're not even going to really have to blitz a whole lot just because they now have really good coverage and their defensive line is just full of monsters right now. I mean, Jordan Davis is an absolute monster. Fletcher Cox, we all know what he can do. Brandon Graham is going to come back. He's coming off that torn Achilles. I think a lot of people forgot about him. I know I did when I was considering who the Eagles are going to have at defensive end. You're going to have Josh Sweat, Javon Hargrave up the middle. We all know Jonathan Gannon does not blitz. He does not blitz. He did not blitz last year. It got on a lot of fans' nerves. And this season, he may not have to. He may not, the way this Eagles defensive line is stacked up. They should be able to get to the quarterback regardless of if they're blitzing or sending 4, or maybe even sending 3, depending on who's out there and who they're against. And I haven't even gotten to the offensive side of the ball yet. I mean, obviously, the Eagles go out and trade for A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown is now going to be paired up with Devontae Smith. That's got to be one of the top duos in the league. I'm going to be getting into that a little bit later in one of the hot takes, in fact. And the Eagles still have Quez Watkins, who there was actually an interesting article on NBC Sports Philadelphia out earlier this week that basically kind of goes through how Quez Watkins might even be a little forgotten in this stacked Eagles offense right now. Remember, they also went out and signed Zach Pascal earlier this year from the Colts. He's probably going to be wide receiver 4, which means, yes, finally, Jalen Reagor should be traded, or at least just should be released, because I'm not sure if there's any team in the league right now that would even benefit from having Jalen Reagor. I mean, maybe as the water boy, but that's about it. I mean, Howie Roseman has just had one heck of an offseason. The Eagles have, I think, no doubt, have had the best offseason among any of the teams in the NFL. And it's really at this point that I'm really just glad to say that I've never said a single bad word about Howie Roseman. Also, last Thursday, the Eagles' 2022 schedule was released. If you guys have not seen it yet, I'll quickly go through it right here. Week 1, the Eagles are at the Lions. They're going to open up in Detroit. Then they'll come home for Monday Night Football against the Vikings, head to Washington to take on Carson Wentz and the Commanders, then head back home to Philly. They'll take on Trevor Lawrence and the Jacksonville Jaguars. They'll then head out west to take on the Cardinals, come back home to take on the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. They'll then remain home and take on the Steelers. They'll then head to Houston to play the Texans for Thursday Night Football. Carson Wentz will then make his return on Monday Night Football on November 14th. That'll obviously be a huge game in this city. The Eagles will then head to Carson Wentz's former home in Indianapolis to take on Frank Reich and the Colts. They'll then come home Sunday Night Football against the Packers, and then they'll take on the Titans to kick off December. They'll then go on a 3-game road trip up to New York to take on the Giants, to Chicago for the Bears, and then to Dallas on a Saturday game on Christmas Eve to take on the Cowboys, and come back home for their last 2 games against the New Orleans Saints and the New York Giants. And by then, hopefully we're talking about another Eagles playoff berth. They've made the playoffs now for the last 5 years, and the expectations are certainly high. And so with that, I have made predictions for this Eagles season for each game on the schedule. Week 1 at the Lions, I have the Eagles winning this game handily, 34-13. The Eagles really should have no problem with the Lions. They had no problem with them last year, and they haven't really gotten a whole lot better this season. Then they'll come home for their home opener against the Vikings. I think this is going to be a really close game, and honestly, it could go either way. But the way the Eagles are stacked up right now, I think they eke out a win, 31-28. They'll then head down to Washington to take on the Commanders. I think that this game is also going to be very close and could go either way. But again, I have the Eagles pulling it out, 24-23. They'll then come home to take on Trevor Lawrence and the Jags. I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. The Jaguars have really improved this season, obviously, along with the Eagles. They've probably had the second best offseason among any team, really. But I have the Eagles winning this game 37-31. I then think the Eagles will suffer their first loss of the season out in Arizona against Kyler Murray and the Cardinals. I have the Eagles losing this game 26-16. And then, unfortunately, I know you guys are not going to want to hear it, but I have them losing the following week as well against the Cowboys at home, 27-20. I then think they get back in the win column against the Steelers the very next week after their bye week, which comes in week 7. I have the Eagles winning that one 35-32, another high-scoring affair. I then think they make easy work of the Texans down in Houston Thursday night. 33-17, I think, is your final. I then think the Eagles have another close game against the Commanders. I don't see the Eagles losing Carson Wentz's return to Philly. I just don't see it. I think they win that game 27-23. I did also make these predictions before the James Bradberry signing, which is why I originally had the Eagles losing to the Colts 23-17. But I've since changed that. I now think the Eagles go and beat Frank Reich and the Colts 27-20 in Indy. At this point, the Eagles are now going to be 8-2, and fans are going to be clamoring for them to head to the Super Bowl. I mean, the Eagles do, in fact, start out 8-2. There are going to be Super Bowl vibes in this city. It's going to feel exactly like it did back in 2017. Obviously, that season, the Eagles were 9-1, so just one game better. And the fans got what they wanted that year. But anyways, back into the schedule. I then think they return home. This game is going to be a really tough game against the Packers on Sunday Night Football. I don't see them winning this one against Aaron Rodgers. I think they're going to lose it 41-28. They'll then take on A.J. Brown's former team in the Tennessee Titans. This game's going to be close, and I think it also probably could go either way. But I think the Titans pull this one out. I mean, the Eagles can't win every close game this season. I think the Titans win this game 28-20. I then think the Eagles go 2-1 on their 3-game road trip in December. I think they beat the Giants. These divisional games are always tough, especially up at the Meadowlands. I think they win this one 21-19. They'll then head to Chicago, take on Justin Fields and the Bears. I think this game is a pretty easy win. I think they win it 30-20. And then, unfortunately, I do have them getting swept out by Dallas this season. I think they lose Christmas Eve 45-31. Dallas's offense has had some really good games against the Eagles' defense, and I know that they have improved this year. But, I mean, they've got to have one or two bad games. I don't think this defense is built to allow 25 or less points through all 17 games this year. I just don't think they're built that well. But they are going to be really good. The Eagles will then return home to take on the New Orleans Saints on New Year's Day. I think this is another close game that the Eagles drop barely 34-27. And then I think the Eagles beat the Giants to finish off the season 34-23. I think they clinch a playoff berth in that last game against the Giants. I have them finishing the season at 11-6. I'm not sure if that's going to be good enough for the division. Dallas is still pretty good. And if the Eagles do end up tying Dallas at 11-6, I do have the Dallas Cowboys owning that tiebreaker against us, with them sweeping the season series. Either way, the Eagles are going to be really good. I think they're either going to win this division or they're going to get one of those high wild card spots. And I really think that it is possible that we could see an Eagles Cowboys game in the playoffs, especially if that is the 4-5 matchup on wild card weekend. No matter who's the 4. But especially if the Eagles are the 4 seed and that game is in Philly, that place is going to be absolutely rocking. I mean, these fans are probably going to be loud all season. I mean, there has not been, I don't think, this much buzz in the city. And I know this is a football city and all, but I don't think there's been this much hype, really, around this Eagles team since they were making their Super Bowl run 4 years ago, back in 2017, and then in 2018 in the playoffs. There are a lot of people saying, oh, the Eagles are going to the Super Bowl, the Eagles are going to the Super Bowl. It is still May, people. I do think we have to realize that it is still May. A lot can happen, a lot can change for good, a lot can unfortunately change for bad. This is Philadelphia, as we all know, which means that things could go bad in a hurry. But you know what? I think it's high time that we end that streak. However, the Phillies did not end that streak these last 2 series against the Padres, and now they're taking on the Dodgers. Obviously, the Phillies look like they might be ready to turn it around last week. Last week, they took 2 or 3 from Seattle. The offense was red hot, and then they just go down to LA and just absolutely beat up on some really good Dodgers starting pitching. I mean, they made light work of Walker Buehler and Julio Urias, and even Tyler Anderson, who was a really good pitcher with a sub-3 ERA going into that game. The Phillies beat up on them and took 3 out of 4 from the Dodgers. Obviously, the bullpen really struggled in that series, but the offense was able to bail them out. And now, this past week, they come home. They had really good crowds against the Padres. They had a pretty good crowd last night against LA. And what do? They get shut out in 2, because they did score 1 run last night, a pity run really in the 9th, because the Dodgers didn't bring Craig Kimbrell in since they made it 4-0 in the top half of that inning. So they get shut out in 2 of the 4 games. They go on a 21 2/3 inning scoreless streak, which is the longest of the season. It's also the 3rd stretch this season that the Phillies have had. It's the 3rd scoreless streak this season of more than 17 innings. This offense is just was not advertised, and it's not built for that to ever happen at all during the full 162 game season. I get it, you're going to go through cold stretches, but I mean, this is just ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous and appalling, really, what is happening with the Phillies. They did not put together really any good at-bats the entire homestand so far. After it seemed like every at-bat was good in that LA series last weekend. I mean, Nick Castellanos has gone cold, JT Realmuto has gone cold, Kyle Schwarber has gone cold, and of course Bryce Harper's been out of the lineup after receiving the PRP injection in his elbow on Sunday. Hopefully he's back for tonight's game, but we shall see. But either way, Bryce Harper or no Bryce Harper, this lineup is just too deep to struggle this much when, in essence, you're really just missing one player. Again, Nick Castellanos, 5-year, $100 million. JT Realmuto, 5-year, $115.5 million. Kyle Schwarber, $479. He hasn't really done anything this season at all. He's never really gotten hot. He's had some home runs and all, but he's still hitting under the Mendoza line. That just cannot happen. It just can't. Rhys Hoskins, fortunately, seems to be getting a little bit hotter. He now has 5 home runs in his last 11 games. But, I mean, one player cannot be your whole lineup, whether that be Bryce Harper or Rhys Hoskins. In this case, the Phillies now sit 7.5 games behind the New York Mets. They're tied with the Atlanta Braves for 2nd place in the NL East. I mean, they are falling fast, and the Mets do not look like they're going to stop. I mean, Max Scherzer did end up going on the IL after straining his oblique. He's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks. Obviously, Jacob deGrom, the Mets have been just fine without him. Taylor McGill, he's going to be out for a couple of weeks. He was placed on a 15-day IL. So the Mets are down their top 3 pitchers. I mean, if there was ever a time to make some moves in the division, it's going to be right now. I mean, it's going to be right now. The Phillies are going to need to take, at the very least, one of the next 2 games they have against LA, and then they're going to head down south to Atlanta for a 4-game series this weekend. Atlanta's obviously been struggling. They have the same record we do at 18-21. The Phillies are going to need to show that they can beat the Braves. They've not been able to beat the Braves in Atlanta in a while. Obviously, they got swept down there last year when they went in needing a sweep in September. And they need to find a way. I mean, at the very, very minimal least, they need to split that series in Atlanta, because if they don't, I mean, there are going to be some tough times in that Phillies locker room, I think. I really do think they need to win that series in Atlanta. They need to they can't let Atlanta get hot, because if they get hot and they kind of take over second place in this division, then you can count the division out, really, for the Phillies, and it would just come down to the wild card. Right now, they are just 3 games behind the St. Louis Cardinals for that final wild card spot in the National League. The expanded playoffs will hopefully end up benefiting the Phillies this year, and hopefully they won't even need the expanded playoffs because they could just get hot. But with this team, it seems like that is not coming up anytime soon. They have a really rough schedule ahead of them. They obviously finished up this series this weekend against the Dodgers. They'll then head down south to take on Atlanta, and then head up north to take on the New York Mets up at Citi Field, which has been a house of horror for the Phillies as well. But yeah, just to get into some of the struggles that the Phillies offense has been having, Nick Castellanos, he's 5 for his last 38. JT Realmuto's 2 for his last 24. Kyle Schwarber had 2 hits last night, one to center field and one the opposite way to left. And you hope that gets him out of his cold streak, because again, he's hitting under 200. And he would be such a huge bat to have if we could end up moving him back up to the top of the lineup. If he can go on even some tear similar to what he had last season, when I believe he hit 18 home runs in 20 games for the Nationals in June and then into July. Yeah, the Phillies offense has certainly been struggling, and in reality, they probably shouldn't be. Because this homestand, if you've watched the games, you know this, and have probably yelled at your TV a couple of times for it too. But they have missed a lot of good pitches to hit. Nick Castellanos, I feel like every at-bat gets a fastball down the middle that he either takes or he swings right through. Kyle Schwarber has missed a lot of hanging breaking balls, either on the outside part of the plate that when he's going good, do get hit the other way. And we did see that a little bit last night. So again, hopefully he's coming around, going in the right direction. But I mean, even so, he should not be this cold to begin with, just with some of the pitches that he's seen. JT Realmuto's gotten some hanging breaking balls up in the zone. I mean, seriously, it felt like that Thursday afternoon game against San Diego. I mean, I don't think Yu Darvish ever really threw consistently good off-speed pitches. He left a lot of hanging breaking balls in the middle of the plate. The Phillies did absolutely nothing with. If you want to think back to a time where maybe it was a little bit more, a little bit more of a clutch situation, Alec Bohm missed an absolute cement mixer in the 8th inning of Friday's game against the Dodgers, when he represented the potential tying run in that game, and he got a pitch that, quite honestly, he should have hit out. I mean, I know it's a lot to ask, obviously, but especially from Alec Bohm, who's not really the biggest home run hitter, but he got an absolute hanger and swung right through it. Swung right through it in the biggest spot of the game as well. I mean, I'm not sure if it's just that these hitters just all collectively are not seeing any pitcher right now from any team. If they're just not picking up their stuff. I mean, at that point, you've got to. The best you can do is kind of just watch film and get in the cage and kind of just like test out looking where pitches are. JT Realmuto, I think, is probably the number one candidate to have to do that. He cannot lay off that pitch down and away, that slider, curveball, or whatever it is, down and away. He missed one last night again, and this has been a problem ever since last year. Again, you'd think a $23 million a year guy would be able to make an adjustment over the course of now 8 months of playing time, but that, again, has not been the case with JT, who's now hitting just 224 on the season, just 224. He's only got 2 home runs and just 8 RBIs. 8 RBIs is just not cutting it. I get it. Some of the other players have been a little cold recently, but Castellanos started out the season hot. Bryce has been fantastic. Reese is getting hot, and they're all hitting in front of JT Realmuto, which means he is coming up with guys on base a lot and is doing nothing with them. I mean, he's kind of patented that ground out to shortstop with 2 outs and runners on. So yeah, Phillies week in review, they only win 1 game. That was a 3-0 game on Wednesday against Blake Snell and the Padres. And now looking ahead to this week, they're going to finish up the series against the Dodgers. It's going to be White against Nola, who loves pitching in the warm weather, so he better pitch a no-hitter tonight. I mean, it's going to be really hot out there. If you guys are heading down to the game tonight, make sure to bring some extra water because y'all are probably going to need it. So the Phillies finish up their series against Dodgers this weekend. They take them on at 6:05 tonight. That game's on NBC Sports Philadelphia, along with tomorrow's game at 1:35. Then I'm going to head down to Atlanta for a 4-game series Monday through Thursday. All games down in Atlanta are going to be at 7:20 and on NBC Sports Philadelphia. Then they head up to Citi Field to take on the New York Mets next weekend. Friday's game, NBC Sports Philadelphia at 7:10. Saturday's game up in New York is going to be at 7:15. That game is exclusively on Fox. And then the Phillies and Mets will play Sunday Night Baseball next Sunday on ESPN. Alright, switching gears now into some hot takes. I asked you guys on my Instagram yesterday to provide some hot takes for this episode, and we've got some really good ones here. I'm going to start out with this one that I thought was probably the best one, and it's that Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown are a top 3 wide receiver duo in the NFL, and James Bradberry and Darius Slay are a top 3 cornerback duo in the NFL. Now, I think it's probably pretty easily Bradberry and Darius Slay are a top 3 cornerback duo in the NFL. I mean, the only duo I think that could be better than them is Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters down in Baltimore. But other than that, I think Bradberry and Slay really are, if not top 3, definitely top 5. I think it's a little tougher to call A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith top 3 wide receiver duo in the league. I mean, obviously, Devontae Smith, he's only played 1 year, and it was a really good year, but again, it's only 1. We still have to see what he's going to become, and I think he really could become a star, but at this point, I wouldn't quite call him and A.J. Brown a top 3 wide receiver duo. I mean, just to run through some of the other duos in the NFL, I mean, you've got Jamar Chase and T. Higgins in Cincinnati, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle down in Miami, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen in Minnesota. That might be number 1 right there. Chris Godwin and Mike Evans in Tampa Bay. Obviously, Tom Brady makes them a lot better. I mean, they're still 2 very good wide receivers, even without Brady. And then finally now, another new one in Devontae Adams and Hunter Renfrow in Vegas. So the Eagles might have a top 5 wide receiver duo. I mean, I think Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown might be better than Evans and Chris Godwin. I think that's close right there. But I mean, the other 4 that I mentioned, I don't think they're quite on their level just yet. Another hot take that I received yesterday was a possible Didi Gregorius trade. This could happen. Bryson Stott obviously has been ice cold ever since he's come up to the big leagues. So right now, I think the Phillies' best option at shortstop is Didi Gregorius, but you never know because his contract's up at the end of this season. If the Phillies do really believe that Bryson Stott is going to be their shortstop of the future, you would like to get something in return for Didi Gregorius, and Stott's going to have to produce eventually. So I think a Didi Gregorius trade could be in the cards. In the comments, drop some mock trades for Didi Gregorius, because I think that the Phillies, if they were to deal him, it would probably be for some bullpen arms, since they would already have a shortstop. But I want to see what you guys think about what a possible Didi Gregorius trade at the trade deadline in July could look like. Another hot take is Philly to the Super Bowl. Okay. It's still May. I think we need to relax a little bit. We haven't seen this team on the field yet. Could this team go to the Super Bowl? I mean, yeah, they could. It's just, I think it's a little bit more baby steps at this point right now. I mean, if they could take one big leap, kind of like what they did in 2016 to 2017, that would be great. But it is still May. Another one is Maxey over Harden. I mean, the eye test kind of tells you they're pretty similar right now. They both kind of were pretty disappointing in the playoffs. I think Maxey obviously provides more scoring than James Harden does. Or at least he provides a better spark. But James Harden still is one of the best assist guys in the league. I'm not quite ready to say that Tyrese Maxey is above James Harden, but he's right on his tail, I think. And finally, the last hot take that you guys sent in was that the Flyers could be surprise playoff contenders next season. I think that they definitely are going to be playoff contenders next season as long as they can stay healthy. They really were decimated by injuries this year. Ryan Ellis, Kevin Hayes missed a lot of time. Sean Couturier. And Carter Hart was really good this year. I mean, he's been good every year that he's been up in the NHL. I've heard Nazem Kadri's name being thrown around a little bit for a potential Flyers signing this offseason. He would be a huge name to get. However, I don't think he would necessarily be the answer for a Stanley Cup run. But yes, I do think that it's very possible the Flyers could be playoff contenders next year. I thought they were going to be playoff contenders this year. I mean, if you remember, they won 3 of their first 5 games. And that was before all the injuries. And I do think that if they stayed healthy this year, they probably would have been contenders this year. Obviously, now in the NHL, you need like 100 points just to make the wild card. So it's going to be tough for the Flyers next year, obviously, but if they can stay healthy in this Metro Division, I mean, they're going to have to, they definitely could contend for the playoffs next year. And now finally, to cap off the first ever edition of the Philly Sports Spot podcast and YouTube channel, I want to give out today's trivia question. Now, every week I'm going to have a trivia question, and it's going to be kind of like a contest. And so the first person to correctly answer the trivia question is going to be entered into a drawing to win 2 Phillies tickets to a game at a later date this season, and the winner will be announced also at a later date this season. I've not decided on an exact date for either the announcement or the game, but it will be a weekend game, just so whoever wins would be able to go. Alright, so in order to answer the trivia question and be entered into the drawing, you need to be the first person to respond correctly. And what you have to do is you have to be subscribed to the YouTube channel. You have to follow me on Instagram at Philly Sports Spot. That's PhillyssportSpot. So just one S there in between sport and spot. And you're going to need to DM me your answer along with a screenshot of you being subscribed to the YouTube channel, and if you are the first person to do that each week, you will be entered into the drawing for the Phillies tickets. Alright, so this week's question is, when was the last time the Eagles started out the season 4-0 or better? In my predictions earlier this episode, I do have the Eagles starting out 4-0. Again, when was the last time the Eagles started out 4-0 or better? Okay, and that is going to wrap things up for the first ever edition of the Philly Sports Spot podcast and YouTube channel. I'm going to be posting every week on YouTube, obviously for the video side, and then the podcast side, you can find me on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. So again, if you guys are here from the YouTube side, please like this video and subscribe and turn on notifications so you are notified whenever I post. And if you are from the podcast side, please share this podcast with anybody and everybody who you think would want to listen. I'm your host, Jordan Hirsch, saying thank you so much for watching and listening. Be sure to tune in next week for episode 2 of the Philly Sports Spot podcast and YouTube channel. Have a good week, everybody.